Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. Good to be back. As always, it's been kind of busy in the last few weeks. I've been running around the world as always. I'm actually in the east coast of the US. I had a couple of meetings in Washington, D.C., and before that, I was in Houston. So, a lot of exciting things to talk about. There's never a dull moment in our industry, is there? Let's jump right into this. Obviously, the big news of the last couple of weeks has been the FID of the Louisiana LNG project. The Woodside, I think it's 16 million tons or something of that sort. It's big news. It's very big news. Obviously, this is the first FID in over a year. I think it is. That's probably 20 months or something like that. Are we going to see many more FIDs this year? I actually don't think so. Woodside kind of had to make a decision on FIDing this project while they still had a control of the cost. My understanding was that the cost that they estimated they got from Bechtel was going to run out, so they had to either make a decision and get to FID or wait a few more months, and the cost will likely have gone up. There'll be a lot more uncertainty with all the tariffs. All the cost structures are very, very hard to predict right now. And I think they decided they're going to take a risk and jump right into it. Obviously, the cost is still quite high. The public numbers are over $1,000 a ton, which is obviously a lot more than we would like to see, but in line with kind of what we've seen Venture Global in the last announcement a few months ago when they did their number release. So I guess that could be the new world. If you're looking at $1,000 per ton, I think the days of cheap liquefaction fees from the US are probably not going to come back for a while. And that's based on a more certain environment. The message that I heard all throughout in Houston and in Washington, D.C. was we just don't know what to do with the tariffs. If the tariffs come in and the numbers are really as high as they say they are, which is 25% on steel, that's going to kill a lot of projects. I don't think there's going to be a lot of FIDs this year because no one is going to be able to estimate the cost of the projects. I don't think banks are going to be willing to take that 25% risk. I don't know what it's going to translate to, probably a 10 or 15% overall capex increase to the project. Are banks going to take it in their project finance? Probably not. Are the sponsors willing to take it on their balance sheet? Some of them don't even have that much. If you think of a 10, 15% cost overrun on a $10 billion project, you need to have $1 billion ready in case there's a cost overrun. A lot of the projects in the US and other places are developed by private developers who may not have $1 billion that they're willing to lock up in a cost overrun account. So I think that this really does put a hamper on things. That's why I think that Woodside probably did the right decision by saying, "Hey, we things are always going to be uncertain, but they're going to be less uncertain now than ever before. So we might as well jump in and pull the trigger." So high cost. Publicly, they haven't sold a lot of the gas. This is another first in our business. All U.S. projects in the past have always sold a substantial percent of their gas beforehand, before the LNG, before they actually declare FID. Woodside does not seem to have done that. So obviously, they're taking a massive risk. They have said publicly, I think, that 8 million tons of that output is going to be on their own books. That's a lot of gas that they now need to resell. Obviously, they have their customers in Japan, that in Korea, that have been buying the Woodside projects products from the Australia. Are they the same customers they're going to try to tap into now? They have a great relationship with these customers, but they may or may not be willing to sign up for those massive volumes that Woodside wants to resell to them. So this is going to be interesting. I know there's lots of rumors flying around with who might be the other customers, but to actually declare FID when there's only 1 million tons or something even maybe potentially less than 1 million tons sold to a third party, and the project is 16 million tons, that is crazy. That is a massive risk that they're taking, both on the cost. I think they've reduced that cost by obviously jumping into the Bechtel numbers today, but without the offtake. If they are getting project financing, it's not really clear. That's not really been publicly disclosed how much is project finance and how much is equity finance. I think it's a great sign. I mean, banks are willing to put up with a bit more of the volume risk. If banks are willing to fund projects without the majority of the project output sold under long-term contracts, that is a fantastic development. We've been waiting for that development for a long, long time, and it's really good to see that might be finally happening. I sure as hell hope so. The other big news of the week was Argentina. They announced Golar has announced two FLNG ships totaling 6 million tons to be deployed in Argentina. Argentina has always been a place where there's ups and downs. They're exporter, they're not an exporter, they have a lot of gas, they don't have a lot of gas, are they short of gas, are they seasonal, are they going to sell their gas on pipelines to Brazil? Is just full of uncertainty. But the fact that now they're willing to deploy some ships there is a really big deal. Now, publicly, I read that the Golar expects to make about $700 million a year on the lease of these two ships. If you times that by 20 years, that's $14 billion. $14 billion without even any inflation. $14 billion is just the rental fee. Plus, there's another fee associated with liquefaction that they haven't disclosed. So, a minimum of $14 billion to produce 6 million tons a year. Wow, that's more than $2,000 a ton. Remember, I just said that the Woodside LNG project, Louisiana LNG, is going to be $1,000 a ton, or slightly above $1,000 a ton. So this cost is double what an onshore project would cost. Of course, the advantage of that, you can deploy FLNG wells really quickly. One of the ships can probably be deployed there within a few months. The next one is being converted right now. Probably within a year or two, will be deployed. So you got that advantage. And of course, you have an advantage that if all things go to hell in Argentina, like we have seen they have done, they could happen again. Argentinian history is very tumultuous, especially for economic stuff. Then the ships can be taken away. But you have to think yourself 6 million tons of FLNG at double the cost of an equivalent LNG project. And FLNG is good, it's fast, it's quick, it's deployable, redeployable if things go to hell. But on the other hand, you're paying a lot of money for that luxury. You're paying a lot of ongoing capex and ongoing that you cannot project finance. If you do a build an onshore project, you can project finance this thing, capitalize it, depreciate it, etc. Here, it's an operational cost. It's a lease that you pay continuously for the next 20 years. Golar is loving it. They can now bank on 10, $15 billion of revenues as long as the Argentinians keep on paying. And on the other hand, Argentina can hopefully export gas. So we'll see how that all works out. I think that FLNG has a place in every part of the world that makes sense. Does it make sense in Argentina? It makes sense in a place like Mozambique where we know there's political risk. It makes place in a place like Papua New Guinea where we have an issue about land ownership as well as political risk as well as violence. In Argentina, it probably makes sense just because of the economic uncertainty, but you're going to pay a price for it. How competitive is that gas going to be? Remember, it's still shale gas. It's coming from the deep interior. It has to get to the shore. There's a pipeline, there's a production cost, Argentinian labor cost, which are not cheap. And then you need to now pay a very high OPEX. Someone's taking that risk. I'm really be curious to see what the long-term offtake contracts are going to be. But hey, it's another model. So we like that creativity. It's good to see the creativity. I'm not convinced it still makes a lot of sense. I'm still trying to get my head around it. Just like people are trying to develop offshore LNG projects in the US. I know some projects are very well advanced. I'm just not that convinced just yet. I'm obviously biased. I'm developing my onshore project. I think onshore makes sense in the US, but I can understand that when the costs are approaching $1,000 a ton, like we've seen with the Tellurian, the Woodside project and the Venture Global projects, and maybe costs are rising to the point that offshore is starting to make sense. But there are limitations as well. I rather project finance it, capitalize it, spend the money up front, and then have a very low OPEX, then pay a big OPEX every time along the way. Because then you have to actually, match your cash flows. There's a lot less of a way to play accounting tricks and sunk costs and defray capital repayments to the banks, etc. When you have a rental, you got to pay the rental. There's no defraying of that rental. So interesting times we live in. Couple of other things that are going on in the business. It's good to see that the Middle Eastern guys are taking full advantage of the uncertainty in the US. I've seen a bunch, deals mentioned from Abu Dhabi and other places. So the Middle Eastern guys are probably thinking that the US uncertainty is very good for them. Unfortunately, the US uncertainty is real. I was in Washington, D.C. A lot of business leaders were there. We were all talking to a bunch of politicians. In the end of the day, this tariffs is a problem. We just don't know if they're on, they're off. If they're on, I don't think we can develop projects very easily in the US. If they're off, it just gives another excuse for investors not to come in. I've had a number of investors now express a lot of concern about the US tariffs and the US political situation. The politicization of LNG is still something I've talked about. I think it's only getting worse. This craziness about percentage of 1% of US LNG has to be exported on US flagships. Well, as far as I know, we can't make US flagships very quickly. LNG ships are not that easy to make. In my past life, I was trying to develop oil tankers in the US, and it was very, very difficult to find shipyards that you can do it. I know the Koreans have bought into a shipyard in Philadelphia. They hope to make that LNG, but LNG tankers are not easy. They take a lot of skilled labor. They take a lot of supply chain. They take a lot of experience. It's not something that's going to happen. And who's going to take that risk of that first American LNG tanker that gets built in a U.S. shipyard? It's going to be late. It's going to be over budget. They're not going to have the skilled welders, the equipment. It's going to be a big, big issue. And the ships are getting bigger. Can the U.S. shipyards even handle ships that big? I don't know. But what bothers me is the fact that the U.S. trade government representative had just kind of laid out this rule without very much consultation. I know the consultation is happening now. I don't know what that really means. And they're linking it to the U.S. export authorization. They basically said, "Hey, if you're a U.S. LNG exporter and you haven't already ordered a ship, or you will order a ship, we might take your authorization away if you haven't ordered a US flagship." I do not like this link to permits that have already been issued. We really have to go back to the point that once a permit's issued, the permit is issued, and the government shouldn't have the ability to quickly and change the rules of the game and take away the permits already been issued. I hope there's some logic and some common sense prevails. I hope this is all just rhetoric, but it just gives uncertainty to US LNG. I predict there'll be no more FIDs in the US this year. Why? Because capex is going to be big. There's going to be no contractors willing to go back to the old capex numbers. This tariffs situation is uncertain, and I think that the buyers are waiting to see how political US LNG is going to be. So I'm not expecting many more FIDs in the US. Are there going to be FIDs in other parts of the world? I don't think there'll be that many. Um, I think the Middle Eastern guys have done what they need to do. I don't think Mozambique is going to be that easy. The onshore Mozambique projects, we'll see. There might be some surprises, but that's my prediction as it is. And lastly, I'll end with a note: is BP going to be acquired by Shell? Wow, who would have thought? Some of them now the majors are consolidating yet again. The last big consolidation like this was when BP bought Aramco and Arco, my company, or not Aramco, Amoco and Arco, the company I used to work for, and now BP might be the one taken out. It just goes to show you can't survive many years with lackluster management. BP has not been very active in the LNG business. Yes, they claim they're going to have 25 million tons. They've got a few offtake contracts, but have they been on the forefront of developing new business models or investing in new projects? They got the Tangguh stuff in Indonesia. They've been working for 20 years, largely a domestic project today. I don't think BP that's going to change the LNG landscape that much. Shell has wanted to be an asset light company. Now they're going to be taking over. If they take over BP, it'll be interesting to see that strategy changes. Bigger is not always better in our industry. Bigger does not mean economies of scale. Bigger does not mean much. It's probably not really good for the customers. There'll just be less. There'll be more consolidation among the trading companies and the middleman, and the customers are going to pay more. So I encourage the customers to go straight to the LNG off-takers like ourselves, invest in the projects themselves. And I think that the middleman, the trading companies and the super majors like Shell and BP and Total, I think they're already going to be taking a larger share of the business anyway. Anyway, never a dull moment in our business. Let's see what happens the next few weeks. Adios.